Just really having a wireless mic. Just having fun with the. You may know him as a purveyor of Micro Machine commercials through the years, Federal Express, but most notably to the people in attendance here, he did the voice of Blurr in Transformers the movie and the series afterwards. It's John Moschitta, folks.
Good morning, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here. I can't believe I'm looking at all these faces out here. I mean, it's really great. I mean, people are coming in and they're sitting down, and I really didn't think anybody was going to be here because I figured everyone's going to show up to see me it's early in the morning. But you're all here. I couldn't believe you dragged yourself from the room over there because everybody was so busy looking at all the stuff.
Now, John's going to be fielding questions and answers like we always try to do. Mr. Dennis Davidson will be fielding a wireless mic, which seemed to work very well last year. If you have a question for John, raise your hand. Dennis will find you. He'll try to be equally fair on both sides, in front and back, and so on and so forth. Ask your question, and basically have a good time. Thank you.
I see one hand up. It's going to be a very short session if there's only one question.
What time are you leaving? What was it like working on Saved by the Bell?
Well, let me tell you. So, Saved by the Bell, I only did 2 episodes as Terrible Testaverde, the history teacher. I just got my 160th check from one of the episodes the other day. They run more than I Love Lucy around the world. They're on, I think, 16 times a day in the United States. The one problem when you work with kids, I mean, they were all under 18 on that show, so you don't really do anything all day. You sit around while they're in school, and then you get them for about 15, 20 minutes, and they come out. And, of course, being a kid's show, the adults all have to be idiots. So you do a lot of stuff that you would never do in real life, you know. I mean, like what history teacher would dress up in hip-high waders and come in with a plunger to fix the pipes in the school? You would never happen, but, you know, you gotta look like, they gotta make it look like an idiot, so you do it.
Yes, I'd like to know how you can talk so fast.
Well, actually, when I was 12 years old growing up on Long Island, there was a cerebral palsy fair a few blocks away from my house, and they announced that they were donating $2,000 of cerebral palsy for anyone in the book of Guinness records. So first I wanted to ride the roller coaster at Coney Island, so I called Coney Island, and they said, hey kid, take a hike at 12 years old. We are not going to let you strap yourself into the cyclone for 2 weeks straight. So I went home and I started flipping through the book and decided I was going to eat a car, swallow lead pipes, with the next person in the slide myself in the room, teach myself how to do defense talking. I also had 5 sisters, so to get a word in edgewise, a little bit of self-defense. Plus, being from New York, you talk very quickly anyway. I mean, if I make dinner reservations in New York, I say, hi, this is John Moschitta, M like Michael, OS like Sam, CHIT like Tom, T like Tom, I need a reservation for 2 at 8 o'clock. And they say, okay, fine, Mr. Moschitta, we'll see you at 8 o'clock then. But if I'm down in Atlanta, I say, hi, my name is Moschitta, M-O, and you spell it as slowly as you can, and they go, all right now, sir, that was am what? So it's really kind of a regional thing, too.
Okay, this is sort of related to that first question there. Now, when you're doing voices for commercials or for Blurr, like, do you find you can just do it flawlessly, or do you have some times where you just like sort of just jumble over your words, like, you know, like I'm going so fast, I'm going, you know.
Well, sometimes I'll make a mistake and nobody else hears it, but my brain hears it, and like 7 words later, I totally short circuit. And I say, what did you stop for? It sounded great. I said, well, 4 sentences ago, I made a mistake. And I think, you know, I'll fool myself, I'll keep going, but the whole time I'm trying to say the words and I'm thinking about it, my brain is going, no, you're not. You made that mistake like that. You're going to have to go back and do it again. So you might as well just shut up and start all over again right away. But a lot of times with, you know, some days I wake up, the mouth works great, and other days it just doesn't want, the words don't want to come out. And especially with the Transformers, they were making up words, so it was difficult to do a lot of the dialogue because you'd never heard the words before, and they'd be like, well, how do you pronounce that? Well, we haven't decided yet. So it's like, well, you might want to decide how to pronounce that word before you have me saying it.
How were you approached for Transformers the movie?
They just called me. I happened to be very busy at the time with I actually did the TV episodes before I did the movie. It's just that they took so long in animating them that most of the TV shows were already in the can before we even did the film. As a matter of fact, when I did the film, I was surprised to find out the people that they had hired to do the film were none of the people that were doing the TV show. They had gone with all these big movie stars.
Yeah.
I guess they figured if they wanted a fast-talking Autobot, I was the one they had to call, so.
Were there any, like, I guess, hijinks that would go on when you would do a recording session for your voices?
Well, definitely, the group of guys that were on the TV show in particular, they were really a lot of fun to be around. And if you can imagine a room full of grown men, you know, talking about struts melting and whatever else. It was not something I was taking very seriously. So we were very often reprimanded by the director and the producer for taking too much time to do it because we just start laughing and cracking jokes and doing whatever. So I was always happy when I was available for the group sessions. Very often I was traveling and I had to go in and do the dialogue just by myself, pick up a couple of episodes at one time. But I always looked forward to being able to do the group sessions because it was a lot of fun. And you didn't have to shave or worry about, you know, your hair was sticking straight up, although I don't really have to worry about that generally to start off with.
Hi, I was just wondering, I'm really interested in voice acting myself, and I was wondering, how do you get your foot in the door for doing Transformers or Beast Wars or something of that nature?
Well, it's, you know, there are a lot of people in the voiceover market and a lot of people that want to do it because it's, like I say, you don't have to dress up, you don't have to worry about that. My suggestion would be, if there's a couple of characters you do, to make a little demo tape, and then depending on the area that you're in, find an agent that'll, because the agent is basically the easiest way to find out where the work is, and then they send out your tape and you get called for auditions. The television union, AFTRA, A-F-T-R-A, American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, you can call there, they have local chapters all over the country, and they will send you a list of agents in your area, and you can contact people. And then the agent will, you know, tell you more of what they want you to put on the tape. Once you have actual stuff that you've done, they use those clips, but they need you to put a demo tape together so that they have something to listen to and something they can send out. And that tape should really not be longer than like a minute and a half, and you should have as many different voices in it as you can. Not really. There are casting people, and you can see that information at the end of the show, or you can go onto the websites to find out, and you can send the tape directly to the casting people. But generally, they don't listen to them because they just get bombarded with so many people who have agents that they don't listen to them. And the voiceovers in particular are very difficult to break into because there are a lot of people that do most of, you know, just a few people that do most of the roles. Or when we had extra characters on Transformers, they didn't hire extra people, we just did it. You could do, the union allows you to do up to 5 characters an episode. So many of the episodes I just did, you know, 3 or 4 extra characters that were maybe only in that episode. So it's very difficult to break into, but once you get in there, then people keep calling you.
How were you approached in getting the voice of Blurr? Who contacted you? How did all that come about?
Well, I had actually done a bunch of cartoon voices for a man named Wally Burr, who had a big recording studio, still does out in Los Angeles. And the director and writer for the original Transformers series was a big fan of mine from a couple of the shows he had seen me on, and he also was one of the writers for a show I did called The Half Hour Comedy Hour, which kind of tanked after 5 episodes. But it was a live show. They tried to make it, I don't know if any of you remember the show Laugh-In, but they tried to make it like the Laugh-In of the 80s. Yeah. And it was fun to go to work. I mean, I got to work with all these great people because they always had all these guest stars. But the show was not very well received. It was canceled after 5 episodes. But one of the writers on that show was the writer for Transformers, and he came up with the idea of a fast-talking Autobot, so they just called me and asked me if I wanted to do it.
Thank you.
How did you feel about doing the movie, and did you do the voice?
I love doing the movie, especially, you know, when I found out who it was. I didn't get a chance to see the movie before it opened, and Robert Stack and I were sent out on a press tour for the movie, and they assured us that it was not violent. It was wonderful for a family movie to take your kids to. So we went on every show in the country for the week before it opened, telling people how it wasn't violent and finally a good cartoon that you could take your kids to. And then we went to the opening and the two of us were like sinking in the chair. Oh my God. People will never believe anything we tell them again in our entire lives. So it was a little bit of a shock because we had no idea it was going to have some of the heavy rock music that was in there, and because things were getting blown up left and right. And we kept thinking, well, we did this dialogue, so what do they mean it's not violent? I mean, remember what was supposed to be happening, but oh no, they toned it down, and it looks really calm. But the only line I think it was from the movie, it might have been from the TV series, was Decepticons above me, Decepticons above me. Every place I look, I see Decepticons. I'm on stupid missions, but it's the stupidest mission I've ever been on.
What were the working conditions like when you were filming the movie?
Most of the stuff was done individually at the movie. Just went into a recording booth and I just gave you your line, so you didn't even really know what was happening. You know, they might say, okay, you're getting melted here, or you know, someone's chasing it or something. But it just, you didn't even see other people's lines. They just give you a sheet with your lines and you just read them. We did have to go back in and do pickups one day, and they had everyone kind of all scheduled together, so that was kind of cool to have, Leonard Nimoy and Robert Stack and Judd Nelson and Orson Welles, stellar career, going from Citizen Kane to Transformers the movie. And he kind of was like sort of a giant planet that was ready to eat the universe. Nothing personal against Orson. Very nice guy, very talented guy.
Just as a continuation of that last question, what was it like to work with the so-called quote-unquote serious actors like Robert Stack and Leonard Nimoy and Orson Welles?
Well, I do remember one specific instance where Orson Welles said, "Now, what is a strut?" So, it was he took it a little more seriously than everybody else did. I mean, Leonard Nimoy, after years of being on Star Trek, was used to saying things that didn't necessarily have to make any sense whatsoever. So he didn't really question it too much, and Judd Nelson, I guess, was kind of just easygoing about it. But yeah, they were actually didn't take it too seriously. But Orson took everything very seriously. There's a tape that's on the internet somewhere of Orson Welles doing like a commercial, and it took like 12 hours to do because he needed to know the motivation behind everything he was saying. So he took things very, very seriously.
I'm wondering if you tried to watch the original Transformers episodes when they were initially broadcasted as much as possible and see how your work was incorporated into the final version. If so, like if it surprised you maybe how they switched around or edited it, or if it differed a lot from the reading with the other voice actors.
I saw some of the episodes. I very rarely saw ones that I was on. I was traveling a lot, and I would turn it on and I'd say, "Was this one of my episodes?" And I'd try to remember. But there was such a long downtime from the time we recorded it that even if I did see an episode that I was on, I wouldn't remember if I had said those words or not. And in fact, I did get checks for episodes that I never did, where they lifted parts of lines from other episodes and put the character in there. So I wasn't even aware I was in there. They just like mixed and matched lines here and there and added me to some episodes.
I have basically two questions. One was, Orson Welles, did he die during the filming of the movie?
Yeah, he died before everything was completed. I believe Leonard Nimoy did some of his pickup lines.
So he did do lines for Orson Welles?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I think I forgot my question.
That's okay, there's only a whole room of people staring at you to make you nervous.
What was a typical working relation like doing the show with the other voice actors, and what was a typical working day like? That was the question.
Well, it was really, we did the episodes pretty fast. An average episode took maybe an hour and a half, depending on how much people were clowning around. It's pretty easy. You read it through like a regular show, like you're doing a script. The difference is you have to leave pauses in between each line because they need to edit and do the animation to it. So it breaks you can't really get a pace of actually like you're doing the show. But you try to read it straight through, and then they listen for things that have to be done, and then you go back and redo certain lines that either something wasn't clear or they didn't like the way you said it. But as I mentioned, the original cast for the TV show, they were just hysterical guys. I mean, it was like going to a comedy club when I'd go there. They'd all crack jokes and have a good time. So I really enjoyed having the group experience as opposed to just the, going in and doing it myself.
Yeah, I was wondering if you did any voices for other characters that we would recognize, or in fact any voices you would recognize?
Most of the other voices that I did on the show were like one-time characters that were just in a particular episode and then they would disappear. I didn't do anyone else on a regular basis. I've done voices on other cartoons, mostly supporting voices or guest star roles on anything from Garfield, Bobby's World, Simpsons, just various other shows, but nothing that was a recurring role. I'm up actually for, I supposedly just got the role of a dog on a new show that they don't have the name for, an animated series that's going to be on UPN starting in January. Congrats. So, I would do some of the voice, but I don't remember what it was. You go into a booth, they give you one line to read, and they said, all right, read it 12 different ways, so I have no idea which voice they wanted, but I guess I'll find that out sooner or later.
Yes, hello, sir. I just wanted to ask you, about 2 years ago when Peter Cullen came, he said, or at least on the videotape that I saw, that he was surprised by the fan base that's out there, by the amount of what's going on now, and with you being here, with you seeing the fans in the hats in the dealer room. What is your reaction? Are you as surprised as maybe he might have been about how big this actually is now?
I was just dumbfounded. I was really surprised. I had no idea. And I mean, it's great to see, and last night I had an opportunity to meet quite a few people, and it's very interesting, you know, what different people remember about your career over the course of the years. It just, it's nice to actually get out and meet people and talk to them, so this has been a really great experience for me.
You were talking about how when you mess up, you didn't know until like 4 lines or so. Have you ever intentionally like screwed a line up or put something in just to see if anybody would catch it?
Well, actually, it's funny you should mention that. I did do that once. And actually what I said was, I know I made a mistake, nobody else does. That's the thing, and then my brain fries. But in the Federal Express commercial that I did, the last scene, we did some scenes the first day, and then the guy who was in the Pittsburgh's Perfect Pete, if I can drive, I'm putting in charge of Pittsburgh Traffic, I know it's Perfect Pete, he couldn't get it right. And all he had to say was perfect. But it took like 65 takes, so we didn't finish the commercial the first day. And originally on the set the first day, there was nobody from the ad agency, like one person. Well, the news got back to the ad agency that this was going to be a really funny commercial, so the next morning at 6 o'clock when I showed up for my call, there was like 30 people in suits, which meant 30 opinions on everything, and everybody taking credit for everything. So the last scene we did was the final scene of the commercial where I'm sitting at a desk talking on a phone, and everybody's name with Dick. It's Dick what's the deal with Dave, Dave what's the deal with Don, what's the deal with Dick, Dick what's the deal with, you know, pushing the phones and whatever. And I lean back in the middle of it, and a package comes across. Well, this is where everyone's opinions came in. I think it should be an overnight letter. I think it should be a box. I think it should be a tube. I think it should be this. I think it should be that. So we did it 24 times with different things coming in. Or sometimes the guy's hands would show that was bringing it in. And I didn't make a single mistake in the 24 times. So Joe Settlemeyer, the director, who also did Where's the Beef and a lot of those other commercials, and it's very precision oriented. He said, what are you, a machine? Don't you ever make a mistake? He says, do you want a mistake? I'll give you a mistake the next time. So I said, David's a dork with Dick, Don, and Duck. If you actually see the commercial, as a little joke to the world, that's the take he put in the commercial. I'm sitting there watching the commercial, and I was like, oh my God, I called him. I said, Joe. He said, it's our little joke, John. He had always wanted to call people in his commercials Load, L-O-A-D, and Dork. And the censors would never let him call somebody Dork in the commercial. So in the one scene, there's a boardroom with 9 people around, and then I addressed them as Jim, Bill, Bob, Carl, Fred, Load, Dork, Adolf, and Ted. And after the commercial was running and I was on the Today Show, and I told that story about the thing at the end and about the people being named Load and Dork, all the networks were threatening to yank the commercial because they called somebody Dork, but I guess they decided against it.
From all of the times you worked on Transformers, do you have any particular memory that sticks out in your mind, a funny moment or just something that sticks out in your mind as a treasured memory?
Well, I think that as far as the strangest memory was just to see Orson Welles in all his greatness, both real and imagined, talking fast about, talking about, you know, these Transformer things it was very strange to me. I never thought in my entire life that I would ever even be in the same room with Orson Welles. I mean, it was a man whose work I really idolized. Citizen Kane, The Magnificent Ambersons, these are all incredible movies, and he's made an incredible contribution. And I just never, ever thought I'd be in the same place at the same time, no less, you know, be in the same movie with my, you know, my name up in the credits with Orson Welles, John Moschitta. So that's something that really stuck out. And of course, just as I mentioned, the guys that did the regular voiceovers were just so much fun to work with that I remember that as a very favorable time. I just loved going in there and doing it and spending the time with them.
Okay, this question is sort of the result of some joking around we were doing this morning, but could you do Blurr in a weird situation like trying to pick up women or something? This would have to sound interesting. Could you come up with something like that? Or, I don't know.
Well, I could just walk in the bar and I say, hey baby, what are you doing there? You look like Queen Nefertiti. What are you doing tonight, Queen Nefertiti? You want to take a trip down my Nile?
You were speaking of comical situations while doing the movie. Did you and Eric Idle get to do much work together?
He was not there on the pickup day, so I was never. I never got to. I met him subsequently, but not at the time of doing the film.
Hi, your claim to fame is your voice, but do you have any other talents that we don't know about?
Well, none that I really care to discuss. Well, I write, I produce, I do a bunch of different things. I've created board games and audio cassettes, and I work very closely with a charity called the Starlight Children's Foundation. I'm the executive vice president, and they brighten the lives of seriously ill children. I work out of the California, Arizona, Nevada chapter, and we touch the lives of these kids over 55,000 times every month. So that's very rewarding to me. I love doing that.
Are you still surprised that you get recognized your voice a lot when, like, from the commercials for the micro machines?
The Micro Machine Man, introducing the most widget miniature market of micro machines ever. Don't say micro machines, it's not the real thing. I get, every place I go, a lot of times people just stare at me. They think like I work at the bank or I pack their groceries or something. But it never ceases to amaze me that people not only recognize you, but remember things they've heard about you. Like they'll come up and say, did you really have 5 sisters? I'm like, who the hell are you? Why do you know it? And then of course you forget you told Oprah Winfrey that, and 17 million people saw it. So it always is a little strange. It puts off a couple of my friends, if you're out at dinner or whatever. I'm sitting at a very nice restaurant in LA one night, and a lady came over with her plate and pulled up a chair and sat down and just decided she was going to join me for dinner because I would be more interesting than the guest she was with. It was a little touchy situation because she was trying to okay, fine, now you can go back. No, I want to stay here. You really can't stay here. But it's, it's just something you get used to. And it's nice that people remember, hopefully in a favorable way. The really strange thing is you'll be like standing someplace, and I can always tell when someone, I call it picking me off. I know when they pick me off, and a lot of times people stand right behind you like you're deaf. And they're like, I think it's him, is it him? It's not him. Is it him? It is him. It's not him. It is him. I was on a line at an airport one time, and finally I turned around and said, yes, it's me. I'm the guy. No, you're not. I was like, all right, whatever. Okay, I'm not going to argue with him. I'm not, fine. And then I've also had people follow me places. When I go to amusement parks, because so many of the things that I do are aimed towards a younger audience, the Micro Machine commercials, and I do several things on Sesame Street, and Square One TV, 321 Contact, MapNet Adventures, and a lot of the cartoon voices. I love to ride roller coasters. It's one of my favorite things to do. But if I go to an amusement park, I have to go like Michael Jackson, with the hat and the glasses. And when I'm waiting online, I can't open my mouth because the kids recognize my voice. And then I literally have like 300 people following me like this herd behind me all around the park. Ooh, he's going on the roller coaster. Let's all go on the roller coaster. So kind of takes a little edge off the day. A friend of mine went with me to, there's a big amusement park out in Los Angeles called Magic Mountain. And he says, oh, don't be ridiculous. Nobody's going to bother you. And I said, no, believe me. If they recognize me, they're going to bother me. And we were in a store, and I went to go buy something, and I literally took my sunglasses. They weren't off for a fraction of a second. And you hear from across the store, the Micro Machine Man! And by the time we left the store, there was like 300 people outside. So he was like, oh God, I'm so sorry I ever questioned you.
You mentioned you were involved with some games. What games were those?
Well, I created a board game called Motor Mouth, which was a fast-talking tongue twister game, which is really a fun game and unfortunately came out in the worst retail year for the toy business, and retailed for $24.95 at Toys R Us, and 2 weeks after Christmas retailed for $4.99 at Target. But it's the #1 selling board game in Europe. It's marketed under the name of Tongue Tangle in Europe. Here it was Motor Mouth, and my picture was all over the board, and maybe that's what scared a lot of people off. I also worked on game show production and created a bunch of game shows for Warner Brothers, and used to work on the Pyramid Show and a bunch of other shows when I was in New York before my acting career started taking off. So I've always been a big game fan. So.
Hi. Obviously, you were already famous for your fast-talking voice, but did the Transformers do anything to further your career, or was it just another step along the way?
Well, hardly. First of all, this gentleman came from Norway. I was talking to him earlier, and that's a long way to come for this. I think he deserves a round of applause just for flying 12 hours to get here. When I first was doing the Transformers, I was extremely busy. I was flying about 250,000 miles a year. I was literally working all over the world. And I continued to stay busy, and I don't know that I can attribute any of that directly to the Transformers, other than, people would come up and say, hey, we, heard you on the Transformers, or we love Blurr, or, so people did start to recognize that. So I know that people had an awareness of it, but I couldn't directly attribute anything just because I was doing more work than I could possibly handle at the time anyway, so I didn't have a noticeable increase.
Did you, or would you ever do a voice on Beast Machines?
Sure. Like I said, I love doing voiceover work, so, you know, all they have to do is place the phone call and I'm there. It's a lot of fun and easy, and the checks just keep coming in. I still get checks from the old Transformers shows, except they have a special arrangement with the union. They only have to send you the residuals once a year. They usually come right, I should be getting them like any time. They come around August, and I usually get about, just a little less than 200 checks, and they total about $4.16. But for the 4,000th run in Australia, episode number 7.
I don't know if you're new or not, but have you ever had a female groupie come on to you?
I am not married, and I actually had a woman who kind of stalked me, who talked fast in New York, who's a stand-up comedian, who I was out on a press tour. I did these audio cassettes. One was called 10 Classics in 10 Minutes, where I did like Moby Dick in a minute and Gone with the Wind in a minute. And she had her agent call up and pose as a reporter from the UPI, got my press schedule, and then showed up at every show I was on, trying to have like a showdown with me. And she was kind of like plagued me for a couple of years. But other than that, it's been pretty common. Several people have had interesting things to say about my vocal and oral abilities and wanting to check them further, but nobody really plaguing me too much except for one woman.
How long did it take you to develop your world record pace talking?
Well, I first taught myself when I was 12, so when you're 12, as your 12-year-olds out there will know, you're pretty obnoxious. And kind of when you set your mind to something, you just do it. So I locked myself in my room. At that time, the record was set with the To Be or Not to Be soliloquy from Hamlet. So I locked myself in the room and just kept doing it over and over and over again, for like 14 hours a day for several weeks. And then I'd bring my sisters in and kind of torture them, make them sit down and listen. Now, what did I just say? What did I just say? And of course, they had no idea, because if you ever write To Be or Not to Be in Hamlet, there's like not words that you really use every day. A proud contumely. It's like, what is that? So it was really just doing it over and over and over again when I was younger. And then once you do it, I guess I made the connections in my brain somewhere. I've always been able to do it, and mostly was told to shut up for most of my life. And then someone decided to pay me money for it, and then now it's, my son, the fast talker, is home.
Welcome to Fort Wayne.
Thank you very much. It's my first time here.
Yeah, it's ours too, but it seems like
You said that with such relish. Yeah, it's ours too.
Did you enjoy doing Zorro the Gay Blade?
Well, the industry in general, I loved everything about working on the Transformers. It was really fun, and I'd love to have the opportunity to do it again. The industry in general has just really changed over the years. I've been in the unions for over 25 years now, so it used to be about creativity and making fun things, and now it's all about money. So that part has changed, and there's a lot of people who don't really know what they're doing, who have a business education, who are running things that it takes a little of the fun out of it. It gets to be more frustrating than it used to be. But occasionally you still manage to hook up with a fun group of people and have a good time, and that's what keeps you going.
You mentioned earlier that the unions only allow people to do 5 voices per episode. Is that true?
Well, it's not that they only allow them to do 5. They allow you to do 5 before they have to pay you any more money. If you do more than 5 in a given episode, they have to pay you as if you're 2 people, so you have to get 2 checks. But in the negotiated rate that they have with the union, you're allowed to do your main character and up to 4 more roles, so it's a total of 5 before they have to pay you for the extra parts.
Hello. I got a question for you.
Okay.
Myself, I do a lot of character voices myself. I was wondering, how do you get started in something like that?
It's really difficult depending on what part of the country you're in. And I think there's going to be a panel with some of the other voice people who are in town. They're all from Canada. A lot of the voice stuff has gone up to Canada because a lot of the animation is being done up there or through there. You need to do a couple of characters on a tape, get an agent, get someone to send you out. It's very, very difficult to break into. There are certain people who do 1 million voices. There's a friend of mine who actually is a client of my same manager. His name is Joe Alasky, and he does all the Warner Brothers voices. He took over for Mel Blanc when Mel Blanc died. He does all their voices, and then he does 1 million other cartoons as well. And he's just one of those guys that's on every show I ever work on a cartoon. He's always there, and you run into the same people over and over and over again. And a lot of the people have been doing it for a really long time. Like a June Foray, who is the voice of Rocky. She's, 412. Sorry, June, she's not quite that old, but she's been around for a very, very long time. And she's got a certain quality to her voice. She's got about 15, 20 different characters, and they always decide some way to use those characters. So she gets hired a lot. It makes life a lot easier for people trying to cast if they just know people can do what they want, and they call them in and say, all right, try this, try that. You work out a few things, they zero in on a voice, and you do it.
Do you have like a favorite episode of the Transformers?
No, not in particular. I mean, I like the movie. It was good. I mean, I like seeing it on the big screen. I don't have any of the regular. I have like one episode that's like in a box somewhere that I haven't been able to find. Just when I knew I was coming here, I thought, well, I better look that out and check it out. Remember what it was you did on the show since it was 15 years ago. But I don't really have a particularly favorite episode.
Hi, is there anything in the entertainment field that you haven't done that you would like to do?
I pretty much have been lucky as far as being able to do a lot of different things. As far as movies, I've been in 12 different movies. I've been on over 1,000 TV shows. I've been a regular on 4 series. I've done the whole talk show circuit thing. I mean, it would be great to be on a sitcom again. I've done pilots over the years, but they haven't sold. But that's sitcom work, especially if the cast gets along, is like a day at the beach. It's like a 9-to-5 job. The hour-long shows are just torture, or what they call the one-camera shows. I just did a show for Nickelodeon called Cousin Skeeter, and it's a one-camera show, film show, even though it's only a half hour. It's like they do it like a sitcom. It's not done in front of an audience, and it's only filmed one camera. And with the puppet and all the other stuff, it just takes forever. So you're working 13, 14-hour days, most of the time standing around doing nothing. With the sitcoms, you go in, you work for a 9-to-5 job, you go home, and with the exception of the 5th day when you do the taping, where you go in late in the afternoon, because then you have audiences that come in at usually like 5 and 7. You just go right through it like it's a real show, you get audience reaction, and you go home. So, I mean, I would love to be on a sitcom again, but I've been on them in the past, and I do usually several guest star roles a year on various sitcoms, so I've been one of the lucky ones that manages to keep busy.
Do you own all of the movies and episodes that you did?
I don't, but actually, a guy from Norway has a website where that's all listed, so as soon as he gives me that information, I'm going to check it out and see, because I don't remember.
Did you want to do the voice of Blurr for the Transformer series, cartoons after the movie?
I actually did the voice for the TV show before I did the movie, and I was surprised when I did go to do the movie that they weren't using the TV people. It's just that they rushed the animation on the movie to get that into the theaters before the TV shows that I did. But actually, most of the TV shows were recorded prior to doing the movie, for me.
Just got a couple here. Has anyone come close to beating your record yet in fast talking?
Well, actually, there's a man in England his name is Steve Woodmore, who is actually listed in the book for speaking faster than I. But as far as I'm concerned, you can't understand a word he's saying. So, and actually, you know what it is? It's kind of a battle between the U.S. and the U.K. And the U.S. editor, I've been on shows with him, and he says, as far as he's concerned, I'm the only one that really does it because you can understand what I'm saying. And when they slowed down the tapes, we had actually a talk-off at the opening of the Guinness Museum in New York. We had this one lady who was plaguing me. She was immediately disqualified for not saying anything. She does Three Little Pigs, and the only thing she actually says is huff and puff and huff and puff and huff and puff. Otherwise she goes, and she just makes noise. She's not saying anything. But the results of that test were disputed because he had actually left out 3 sentences. He beat me by 1/100th of a second, but when they went back and listened to it, it was done live on Good Morning America. Good Morning America, Israel was bombed that morning. The contest was supposed to be between 7 and 7:30. They were going to then give the linguists time to analyze the tapes and make a decision by 9 o'clock. And because of the Israel being bombed, all the hard news stories came first. We didn't actually do the contest till like 25 to 9, and then they were all in the control room screaming at these linguist guys. So they made a decision solely based on the time, which was he was 1/100th of a second faster than I was. When they went back and listened to the tapes, they found out that he had left out some sentences, so they nullified the results And we were supposed to have a rematch, which every time he was refusing to come back to the US, so every time I was in London, he was conveniently not available. I was told that they were not going to allow any of us to do our own records. We were the only two, and we were going to have to go head to head. And then they kind of pulled a whammy on me, and the day before the book went to print, they let him go on a show in England and try to break the record. They did not properly verify it. They sent me a copy of it. I sent it to MIT in Massachusetts, and he really wasn't saying anything, but they put it in the book, and it just became too much of a, I didn't need to fight about it, so. But he's still in the book as far as I know. I'm in the US book, but he's in the worldwide edition.
You can talk really fast, but can you sing really fast?
Actually, I've done some of the Gilbert and Sullivan stuff, which is really fast, and I was going to do a rap song years ago. It was decided after I did it that I probably shouldn't do it. It was kind of like an anti-Reagan song. It was called the Ronnie Rap. And after I finished it, I thought it was really good and fun, but my agents had a big meeting with me, and they thought that I would probably be alienating 50% of the population if I came out with an anti-Reagan song, so that it was better that I stick away from politics, so it never was released.
Since Mr. Reagan is no longer in office, could you grace us with a sample of that rap?
If I remembered it, I would, but it was so many years ago. I actually worked with Ronald Reagan several years later. There's a men's club in San Francisco called the Bohemian Club. It's a very exclusive private club. And they have a summer encampment every year for two weeks, 3 weekends up in the Russian River. And they put on shows every weekend. And the middle weekend is like the kind of lighthearted show. And it's all men. They did a show called the Maltese Owl, because the owl is their little trademark. And it's a singing, dancing, funny, just lighthearted takeoff of the Maltese Falcon. And they don't, there's no women, so the men dress up as women and do whatever. And I was brought up there at the end of the show. There was supposed to be a knock on the door, and they open the door and Ronald Reagan walks out. It's a very conservative place. All the presidents were up there. I was up there the day after they inaugurated the Nixon Library. So Nixon, Ford, Carter, Reagan, every living president was up there. It was really incredible to meet all of them. And Reagan was supposed to walk on and say, "I don't know what's going on, I'm so confused." Which at the time, he really was. And he couldn't remember his line. So he ended up not being in the show. I just came out, I just was the one knocking on the door, and I came out and said, in case any of you were confused about what was going on, what happened was, so-and-so was in the closet over there, and when they did that, they changed the clothes while they were in the closet when they came out, and that's why you didn't think they were that person over there. And I recapped the whole show so people knew what they were doing. But it was I'd gotten an invitation to the White House while he was president, and I ended up missing going to the cocktail party because I was circling Dulles Airport. And I started to tell him that story when I met him, about I never had the opportunity to go. I was invited, and he was just looking at me like he didn't know what planet I was on, so I didn't go any further. My favorite thing from that weekend was I got to have lunch with Henry Kissinger. And he was sitting there, and a gentleman at the lunch with us was trying to get him into a political conversation, and he just didn't want any part of it. And finally someone said, "Well, what do you think would have happened if Khrushchev was assassinated instead of Kennedy?" And he thought for a second, and he said, "Well, there's one thing I can say for absolute certain. Aristotle Onassis would not have married Mrs. Khrushchev." For those of you too young to know what Mrs. Khrushchev looked like, it was nothing like Jacqueline Onassis. So.
On the Transformers show, did they have you read the lines exactly as they were written, or did they allow ad-libs?
It was pretty much exactly as they were written. Everything had to be timed down to certain minutes with the TV show. If words, for whatever reason, combination of words didn't come out right, or sometimes people would make suggestions and they would let us make the difference, and make the changes. But generally, it was pretty much what was on the page.
I've actually got two questions. One you've already kind of answered. The first one is, I've read various interviews with some of the Beast Wars actors that have been asked how do you get into voice acting. And something that Scott McNeil in particular has pointed out is that whenever you first start, it's years of grunt work, and before you actually build yourself up to the point where you're traveling and you've got pretty much a gig lined up every time. Those first few years, as you're building yourself up, do you do something on the side as far as income goes?
Well, I have, like most actors, when you're starting out, I mean, I've worked in mental health clinics, I've sliced deli meat, been a waiter. I used to volunteer for scientific experiments at the NYU. Sit in booths and get bombarded by positive and negative ions, and have to do reaction time tests. So you do whatever. I didn't ever sell my blood, however. That's a lot of my friends used to do that. Oh, gee, it's Tuesday, I can go sell another pint of blood. So I never had to resort to that, but I did do just about every kind of odd job you could imagine. And then I started doing TV production. And then I got a job working for Warner Brothers, had a two-way interactive cable system called Cube back in 1977 in Columbus, Ohio. It was also when Nickelodeon was starting, and all the Nickelodeon shows came out of the studios in Ohio. So I was hired as a producer-performer for them, and I had 2 live shows on the air every day in Columbus, Ohio, plus I had a show on Nickelodeon called Nickel Flicks, which was on 3 times a day, 7 days a week. And we did all the filming for those shows there as well. And I did that for 2 years and then moved out to LA, and it was like starting all over again. I didn't ever have to really take actually, I did have a job for a while. I was run over by a drunk driver while I was roller skating in Venice, and was in bed for 3 months, and all my money went to pay like medical bills. So I took a job for working for Dom DeLuise, taking care of his kids for a year. So that was a pretty interesting job. I lived in the house, and it was kind of like the cook and nanny for the kids, but it was fun. And then other stuff started catching on. While I was doing that, I would be on an episode of Laverne and Shirley or Happy Days or whatever. But it wasn't enough to make a living, because the guest star roles, I mean, they pay okay, but unless you're doing them every week, you can't really live on that amount of money.
My second question, and like I said, you've already kind of talked on this. You're talking about if you're wanting to break into the voice acting industry to, do a demo tape, find an agent, and most of the work's in Canada. I'm from Oklahoma, which is the absolute farthest place from anywhere anyone could possibly get into voice acting. Do I just need to move to Vancouver, or what would be a...
Well, there is, it depends what kind of, if you want to do cartoons, voiceovers, you definitely, there's not too many cartoons that are done in Oklahoma. There are commercials that are done in Oklahoma, and there are voiceovers that are needed in Oklahoma, and there are agencies in Oklahoma that, agents that, certainly some of the bigger cities, that will send people out, and, I think you have a better chance of starting out and getting stuff that's legitimate stuff as opposed to something that you script for your demo tape by actually doing commercials and whatever in a local market. It gives you a credibility when they're hearing actual spots on the promos. So I certainly, before I picked up and moved, would try to get some stuff going locally. You have a smaller talent pool. Granted, there's fewer jobs, but you have people that are willing to help you out more in a smaller market. Then I would reassess exactly what you wanted to do voiceover-wise, and then decide to either move to New York, Los Angeles, or someplace up in Canada.
As you don't remember the Reagan rap, could you favor us with some Gilbert and Sullivan?
I don't remember those. You're gonna all think I just, at my age, you just have limited brain cells, and I don't remember the stuff as well. The one thing I really remember fast is I did for my record. I did the song "Trouble" from the Music Man. So I do remember that, because that is so ingrained in there. So I can give you a little bit of that. And I'll kind of make it like you do it in the song. I'll just do it a little bit faster. Friendly, you're closing your eyes to a situation you do not wish to acknowledge. You're not aware of the caliber of disaster indicated by the presence of a pool table in your community. Like, trouble, my friends, right here, say trouble, right here, in River City, West Shore, Middle Place, starting mind, in front of the most market per se, next to the hours I spent with the crew, my hand to go, help COVID horse, sense of cool head and keen eye. Do everything to try to find an unfit for yourself from the real big shop, just to say, take judgment, brains, maturity, score, and fine game. I say, any boot, take 70 ball, and any pocket, and all that swap. First, you step on the road to the depths of degradee. I say, first, it's a little medicinal wine from a teaspoon, then beer from a bottle. And the next thing you know, your son is playing for money in a pinch suit. Listen to something out of town just for him to tell about horse race gambling, about postal progress, no, but a race for to sit down right on the horse. Like to see some stuck on trying voice setting on Dan Patch, make a blood boil, I should say, now, friends, let me tell you what I mean. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pack in the table. Box of market dinner between a gentleman and a bum with a capital B, and that rhymes with P, and that stands for pool. Much faster than it's actually done in the show. And one reason I remember that is I played the character, the part of the Music Man, several times, so that's why it's even more ingrained in my head.
Hi, John.
Hi.
I'd like to ask you something. Of all the characters, all the voice characters that you've done, is there any one character personality that you've been most attached to?
Well, I think definitely it's an age thing. For the older people, they remember me as the Federal Express guy. A lot of younger kids remember me as the Micro Machine Man. Those are the two probably that I get recognized for the most as far as voices. As far as jobs that have been the most fun for me, I did a promotion a couple of years ago for Home Box Office where I got to play 11 different parts in the commercial. And that was the most fun I had going in to actually do a commercial. And that won tons of awards too all over the world, including Cannes Film Festival awards. So, you know, it's just different people remember different things. I had someone come up to me last night and say, you know what I remember you from? The Disney Anniversary Special. You know, so you don't know. I mean, I've been on the Academy Awards. I did the Motown 25th Anniversary Special. One of 3 white people on the show. My mother said, oh, because they had a big 2-page spread in Life magazine. She said, I picked you out right away. I said, Ma, I was like, you know, one white hand in the middle of all these. How did you do it? You know?
John, have you worked with Peter Cullen or Frank Welker on any other animated TV series?
I worked with Frank Welker on several different shows because he's like a voice on everything. I'm trying to remember if there was anything else with Peter that I did. It might have been Pinky and the Brain. I think he did some stuff on one of the Pinky and the Brains that I did. It's hard to keep track because I haven't, as I said, I've been a regular on one of the shows. So just you go in for one day and you see the same people, so it's hard to keep track of which ones they were on. But I believe I did one of the Pinkies that I did. He was on.
You do know that they have been re-releasing Transformers episodes on Rhino Video, and they re-released the movie. It came out around Christmas time, and it's been selling in retail stores tremendously well. And they're going to put Transformers the movie on DVD in October. That's real buzz around here. So
I can't imagine why that would be a buzz around here.
I'm
shocked.
But you were just mentioning your royalty checks, you know, you should be getting one in August. It should be a little more than $4 this time.
Well, that'd be nice. I vote for that. I like that. I like those free checks, I call them. They just keep coming in.
I have a quick question about something you alluded to earlier about doing the movie when you said that you
having a hard time directing that camera and talking into the mic at the same time.
Yeah,
I'm like walking or chewing gum. It's like
somebody alluded to earlier about doing the movie voices and leaving the breaks in between lines, and it's kind of a chicken before the egg commercial. Typically, when you do a show, is the animation done before the voices, or vice versa? Or
no, the voices are always done first.
Really? Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. Because they need to know how long to make the frames. You know, if they're spending a real long time and a lot of money on the animation, they will actually, you know, make the mouth try to seem like it's saying the line. Mostly it's just for timing. You know, they know how many frames they have to make it. There was a German half animation, half puppet movie called A Rat's Tale or A Rat's Story or A Rat Boy or I don't remember. It was Rat something. It didn't last very long in the theaters when it came out here. But I had to, I played some of the English voices, and they were all done to the German, so you had to time it to like make it look like they were saying that. And the hardest thing was to, when you loop, which is automated dialogue replacement, where you go in and you stare at the screen and you try to, you hold this thing up to your ear, and it beeps 3 times, and the fourth beep is silent, and that's you're supposed to start talking. And then you hear the track of what's actually on the film, and you try to redo it. A lot of times, like in a movie or a TV show, if you're walking down the street, the truck comes by, they can't use that tape because it's a big noise, so you have to recreate your voice and put it into your own mouth. But when it's in English and it's you're just like repeating yourself as you hear yourself in the ear, so it's very easy. But on this German movie, it was all in German. So I had no idea what the hell they were talking about. You know, they're like in your ear, and you're trying to see that. So I had no idea how long that little rat was going to move its damn mouth. And, you know, so it just took forever to do that, forever. And they were like, you know, the directors are there. No, that's not the intent of the line. I was thinking, like, excuse me, I don't know. You're giving me this English translation, and I do understand a little bit of German. So what was even more confusing was what I was saying really was like nothing to do with what they were saying in my ear. So, because they had redone it for the cultural differences and whatever. So it was a very hard job to do.
Yes, we know most of your jobs come through your agent, but is there any roles you've actively sought out in your field or anything like that?
Well, I will have, like if I hear a show is being done or whatever, or something I think I'm right for, I'll call the casting people. My managers will, you know, send stuff and barrage people. I did, in the movie Dick Tracy, I wanted to play the part of Mumbles because I thought it'd be really funny to have the guy who's known for talking really fast and being understood to play a part where you don't understand a word they say. And I actually had 11 auditions for the movie. And Warren Beatty is a very nice man, but is not really known for making his mind up in a quick and efficient manner. So after 11 auditions, we had come to terms that I was going to do the part. We started drawing up the contract, and as luck would have it, that very weekend, he was having dinner with Dustin Hoffman. And Dustin said, "Gee, I'd love to be in the movie. Anything for me?" And then I guess Warren said, "Dustin Hoffman, John Moschitta. Dustin Hoffman, John Moschitta." So he played the part of Mumbles in the movie, which was really a big disappointment to me. But then they gave me another part in the movie, which the first day I showed up, I was on the set at 6 o'clock in the morning. I had this great yellow suit that I wore, and stood around all day because that was the day they spelt out. I don't know if you remember the scene in the movie where they spelt Dick Tracy in the wall with machine gun bullets. And Warren Beatty couldn't make up his mind how he wanted it to spell out. Did he want like D-T-A, like this? So they talked about how to explode these things and how to program them literally for 12 hours. And then we did this stuff, and I came back and filmed a few more scenes. And after the movie was over, they realized something. I was the only one in the movie besides Dick Tracy who wore yellow. And they decided to say, well, only Dick is going to wear yellow in the movie. So as a result, in the final version of the movie, you see this much of my mouth a couple of times, a real close-up of me talking fast, and I'm the voice that comes out of the radio. But other than that, I was like totally cut out. All my scenes where you see my body are gone because I had yellow on. Hate when that happens.
Do you ever find yourself fast-talking by accident? And do you ever use it to mess with people in your daily life?
I use it to mess with people all the time. Especially if they're idiots, like dealing with the billing department of the phone company. It's like, all right, look, no, I really can't talk to you anymore. I need to talk to the queen of the billing department. Would you put the queen of the billing department on the person that's going to be able to help me? And I need to talk to the person who needs to be able to help me because I'm a busy person. I don't really have this kind of time to wait. So would you get that person on the phone with me right now? So it does come in very handy at times. And also in an argument, because you don't give the other person a chance to get a word in edgewise because you just keep going in there like, you just acquiesce and leave.
Hi, John. I want to say thanks for coming out and spending some time with us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's been great.
You said that in your daily life, like at airports and restaurants, you were recognized by people as maybe the Micro Machines or the Federal Express guy. Has there been really many times that people have come up to you specifically because of Blurr?
Yes, actually. There's been quite a few times when people will come up and say, they love Transformers and they have some of the episodes that they taped when they were a kid and they watch them over and over. They like the movie. It's remarkable to me that, I've done so many different things in the last 25 years that I forget I've done things, and people come up and they'll mention them, but very often people do mention the Transformers.
I work in the billing department of a phone company.
I'm sorry, you're the queen of the billing department? If you're not the queen of the billing department, I don't think I can answer your question right now.
To do a supervisor call? Call and talk to my supervisor and mess with her?
Oh, sure. I had a department store out in Los Angeles that they just never sent me my bill every month. And I would call them every month and say, look, it's not that I'm not trying not to pay the bill, you're not sending it to me. Oh, sorry, we're sending it to you. And then I would start to give them such a hard time all the time that every time I would call, they must have had a note in my thing, and the supervisors all said, don't let him talk to us. Don't let him talk. And finally, 9 months later, I got a little letter apologizing. There were 750 people who the computer said it was printing their bill, but wasn't.
So we just go free?
A lot of effort went into reassembling the movie for tonight's showing, and I was wondering if you were going to join us for tonight's showing.
Unfortunately, or fortunately, I will not be able to attend it because I'm on a 3 o'clock plane this afternoon. I take, with some of the work I do with the Starlight Children's Foundation, we have what we call a Kids Activity Network event tomorrow. And we're taking 100 sick kids and their families to a movie premiere. So I'm going to be busy all day tomorrow, so I want to get home as early as possible. It's the Clumps. It's a special thing. Well, yeah, they're the older kids. We have kids. We deal with kids from 2 years old to 18. So the minimum age on this one is 14 to take kids to. And we just took a bunch of smaller kids to Dinosaur a couple of weeks ago when that had first opened. But Eddie Murphy is going to be coming to the screening to meet the kids, and possibly Janet Jackson and some of the other people that are in the movie. So it should be fun for them, and then there's a party afterwards.
You've mentioned about how you and the other voice actors in Transformers would joke around a lot. Who was the biggest cut-up?
Roger C. Carmel was pretty big cut up, and so was Dick Gautier was a big cut up. The two of them kept me pretty much in stitches the whole time. Because they would just pull these voices out of their heads that they would start doing. They were totally inappropriate for the characters. What they'd say was like, okay, now we have this other character and it's so-and-so and this and that, throw out some voices, and they would pick like who was going to do this extra voice for the day. And they would come up with the most hysterical voices. And it was great. They never made it in there, but it was funny.
You were talking about how you've done stage, TV shows, movies, commercials. What's been your favorite thing you've ever done, or the most rewarding? And where does Transformers rank on that list?
Well, my favorite thing to do is anything in front of a group of people. I like live reaction. I mean, I'm really enjoying this. I like, having all this attention, me up here by myself. I'm a Leo. I need that kind of positive reinforcement all the time. So anytime I get to do live stuff, I do a lot of corporate stuff where I do conventions for various companies where I do like a 2-3 minute bit, leave them rolling in the aisles and leave. That's a lot of fun. I like doing the sitcoms because of that. And I really enjoy doing theater because it's a challenge to do the same show 8 times a week, different audience every night, different things work, don't work. You really get a chance to feel the presence of someone else and to fine-tune it. So I think that's the most rewarding stuff for me. The Transformers, I have it really, because of the group of people and that did the original voices, they were so much fun to be around. It really has a very fond place for me.
Hi, you were talking earlier about how when you were going around the circuit talking about Transformers the movie, about how clean and there's no violence, there's nothing like this, and now you're taking kids to see the Clumps.
Well, they're older children, and we sent out with the invitation, the fact that there is a lot of flatulent humor and whatever else in there. If people had a problem with that, they don't have to attend. We do try to do all the different age groups and cover them, and this is primarily for the older teens and their families, so that they can do something too, because we also took them to the premiere of the Train movie last weekend. I don't remember. Oh, God, it was awful. It was torture to sit through it, and as a representative for the charity, you have to wait there till each, the very last person leaves. But it was somebody, the Magic Train, or I don't know. That would be the one, yes. And so that was really for the little kids. I mean, we didn't have any teenagers show up for that. That was really for the 5-year-old, 6-year-old kids. And they really seemed to enjoy it, but anyone above the age of 5 didn't get it. But we're not marketing the Clumps to the 5-year-olds. And parents, kids today are exposed to a lot more stuff than in years past. And as long as you make the parents aware of the type of movie, it's rated PG, it's not rated R, so it's not like we would not take kids to an R-rated movie, but the kids are used to this kind of humor with the various different movies they see, and many of them see R-rated movies. I mean, South Park was certainly not meant for kids, the movie, but I think I saw a bunch of kids walking down the street singing that one song in particular.
Can you talk fast in any other language?
I tried to do it in Japanese one time, in phonetic Japanese, but it really didn't work very well. The problem is the familiarity with the words. I mean, I can do like certain sentences I had to do. I did one thing for a German thing one time where I had to say, it's a really stupid line, don't you pay attention to the mirrors on the street corners, is the line, which sounds like, ach, du nie, spiegel an der Straße, which